This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello everyone, and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast here on the Film Stories Podcast Network. My name is Kurt North. And joining me...
What are you doing?
I'm putting my radio voice on. I don't know why.
I don't have a radio voice. This is my voice.
Well,
This is
come on,
my-
Mark. You need to get yourself a radio voice.
Yes.
I don't want one.
You could have it for Kurt Deep Bath.
I'm so confused.
Taking it easy with Cadbury's caramel.
We've already been derailed. Good.
We're into Red Dwarf 12, and
We
my name
are.
is- my name is Kurt North, and Mark Adams and Carl Bryan are with me. And it's just the way the microphone in front of me was set up. It just felt like I needed to get onto the mic. You know, I did First Contact last year. Well, not even last year, the other month. And this series, you know, I need to do something different. So I've done that. And it's absolutely derailed it. So without further ado, welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose. We've got 6 episodes left of the main show.
Which is bonkers.
Before we go into Promised Land and before we go into whatever comes next. So this is the last 6 episode run, boys. What do you think?
It feels weird to say that after sort of how many we've done, that this is the last, at the moment, the last series. I mean, thank goodness we've got a spreadsheet full of specials.
It does feel odd because not only did we only have 2 specials between series 11 and 12, we actually took no break at all. And we will have done, 14 episodes over 14 weeks by the time this finishes, if all goes well. And that's not the natural way of things. There should be fuck tons.
Would that be 12?
12 plus the 2 specials.
Okay, I'm with you. Okay.
But we normally have fuck tons of specials, and it's not that we're rushing. It's just that we kind of want to be finished if we do get Titan or any other new stuff. And we had an idea for the Promised Land that I got excited about. It's not that we've rushed, because I kind of wanted to watch more Red Dwarf, and I found out it was good as well.
I think this might be a first that I haven't finished editing 11 yet. It's not even, so the fact that I haven't finished editing the actual episodes from the previous season and we're now recording 12 is a bit bananas to me. I just finished the edit for Crisis and I've got Can of Worms to do. So it's really, really weird. Really weird.
Yeah. When the socials went out saying like, oh, we're going to start 11, I was like, was I on those? Just no idea. Sort of like, can't remember what I said. Just it's a complete blank. So it's going to be fun because I can't remember what I said on any of those episodes.
Well, that's really fascinating because Red Dwarf 12 for me, I think because Red Dwarf 11, Red Dwarf 12 were filmed back to back. And I think that because I knew that and it was being split up over the year, that for some reason, Red Dwarf, I kept forgetting there was Red Dwarf 12. If you listen back to the podcast back in the day, I kept going, oh, there's like 11 seasons. And it's like, there's 12. I honestly kept forgetting that Red Dwarf 12 existed. I mean, I will remember some of the episodes, but I would think, oh, that's in Red Dwarf 11. So it is fascinating from that perspective. I mean, Mark, you've got a new perspective around Red Dwarf 12. And as we do every season, or every series, you watched Red Dwarf 12 with us a few weeks ago. What did you think?
I got it into my head that it was going to be crap because of the kind of vibes of, I thought it was generally crap rather than one particular episode being crap. I don't know where I got that from, but I was a bit trepidatious. I didn't want it to be crap. And one of the episodes, which I'm sure everyone knows which one it is crap. But the rest of them are fucking great.
Yeah. What do you make, Carl, then, to this season?
I really like this season. Like you say, there is the one that sticks out like a sore thumb. Which when we did do the all together watch through, we kind of agreed it's not as bad as a lot of the fan base make out, but because the rest of the season is good, that one just sticks out like a sore thumb. But I think, especially these first 2 episodes, there's some really good stuff. And as we talk about this coming up, I think there's going to be a lot of talk about how it veers into almost other genres a little bit in this, especially in the next one that we're going to discuss as well. But I think it's a high standard in this series and last series. But any other series, any other British series, by the time I got to series 12, it'd be just sort of like, well, catchphrase, 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 and with this, the writing hasn't. And I think that's, to be fair, that there really aren't that many catchphrases in Red Dwarf. There's quotable lines, but there's no like, I'm not even supposed to be here today or anything like that.
I mean, the series of botches by Rimmer with the Space Corps directives, that was a regular gag.
Well, that's a running gag, but there's nothing like I'd buy that for $1, that they say every episode. There's nothing like that. Every episode seems to make its own catchphrases in a way.
It's stuff that people react to that they'll redo again in the future, isn't it? Like the Space Corps directives is just a funny way of actually saying a bunch of gibberish, for example. Because it's not necessarily about it's always about him getting it wrong and just be able to say, plane 0G with your whatever, jockstrap, etc., that kind of thing. It just gives them an opportunity to do something a bit comical, I think, just in general.
It's got the air of familiarity for the fan base without it just being like the same line over and over and over again.
Yeah, but even that is reduced in series 11 and 12.
Absolutely.
I know it's not in our purview right now, but the perfect example of that, and it's the ones that I quite like when it comes to stuff like that, when there's a recurring thing, is that you'll always get a one where it slightly alters it. In Time Wave, which is one of the best episodes of Red Dwarf,
Gold standard
of Red Dwarf, there is a moment where Rimmer says about something and goes, Crichton, don't. Where it's like it changes, he rhymes it off and straight away just goes, don't. You know what I mean? So that element is good. And yeah, no, I think it's interesting. It's 11 and 12, obviously, because of the writing, how close it is, are obviously very similar to each other, but still have the differences. I did feel in the 2 episodes we're going to talk about over the next 2 weeks that there is an element, not necessarily of plodding along, but kind of like it feels a little bit weaker overall compared to, I would say, I mean, I know an argument would be had here to say 10 was stronger, in my opinion, and it has a lot more pace to it. And I think, like I've been alluding to for a long time, and now you've seen the 12, and you might get this with Promised Land as well, is the only thing I have with Red Dwarf 12 is some of the referential stuff that they keep bringing back, and you see that quite significantly, especially in Skipper in the final episode. But you'll see that scattered along through the episodes, and that's the biggest criticism I have. But sometimes it feels a little bit plodding. You could argue it's actually giving it space, and it's. I think, Carl, you mentioned genre. I think that might play into it. To be fair, on the other skin, it's sometimes like, Doug, you're playing the greatest hits because you think this is the final, this is the end. Skipper is very much feels like it's an end of a show. So that's my critique of 12. I think, really.
Yeah, I mean, to give a critique of this series is the reason why I think 10's probably stronger is because they had less money. In 11 and 12 is when Baby Cow came in and gave it a bit of a boost and a bit of a cash injection. And you can see that the production quality does go up. I agree that there are elements of this that I'm not a fan of. One of them is the guest stars are all people who are on other Dave shows. So there's that.
I hadn't clocked that, but you're right.
I think you mentioned that in 11, Carl, but you don't remember 11, so we'll give you a pass on that one.
No,
I clearly don't either.
Did 11 happen?
I don't know, did it?
I don't know.
Did we use AI for it, maybe?
It's just Colin talking to himself.
That's impossible. That would be the most impossible edit in the world ever.
True.
But you're right. I think maybe that's it. Maybe there's just more. Throughout this series, there's more characters in it. Isn't there? There's obviously you've got the Johnny Vegases, you've got all the Crichtons, you've got all the people in Cured, you've got what's the other episodes? There is a lot of people, and I suppose that refers a little bit more to 8 than any other show, really.
That's a good point, actually. There's no bottle episode that I can think of.
No, and I mean 10 was almost a bottle series. It was back to being just them stuck in space with each other for the most part. And on this one and on the previous one, meet all sorts of people. 11 was where we went to the bar, wasn't it, with the scientists? There's a lot more of getting off ship on these 2 series, which is odd because they've had the money to have the ship sets upgraded. And so they've done that and then they're off ship.
I'm just going to throw this out there because I'm just quickly looking at it. So I'm going to look at 11 and 12, right, as a quick look. Twentica, quite a lot of people in that episode. Samsara, we've got some special guest star, but they aren't actually in the episode as such. It's more of a unique storytelling thing, and it still feels a little bottle. It feels like old classic Red Dwarf because you're kind of having this separate story happening. Give and Take, when they have the droids taking Lister's kidneys, that's a bottle episode. Let's use the term, that's a Red Dwarf limited scope episode. It's limited scope. Officer Rimmer, that is just Rimmer, so that's good. Crisis, you've got one character in Butler, really. Can of Worms, you've got the polymorph. So that still feels Red Dwarf. And this is probably where, thinking about it, this is probably where it feels, and you've just gotten onto it. Cured, several guest stars. Siliconia, several guest stars. Time Wave, several guest stars. Macrocracy, one guest star, but lots of people milling around it. Macrocracy probably doesn't.
No, that's probably one that doesn't have a lot in it.
Yeah. But it's more self-referential with Toasty at the end. M-Core, that's the one I was thinking, not Macrocracy, where you've got a guest star and a couple of guest stars, but quite a few people in it. And then Skipper is just the ultimate, let's throw everything at the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah.
And that's maybe where I'm coming from with 11, with 12. And the genre thing fits in with that as well, because it feels like it's not quite Red Dwarf, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a point where Doug hits the wall writing-wise, and every few series, and he's like, I've got to bring in more characters, because I just need more people. The creativity to do bunk scenes must dry up at some point.
It's true. But it is interesting how it's got to 12 before he really does it. Obviously in 8, that's by nature of design, that, you're going to have those characters because you're going to live with those characters for a while. It's a bit more serialized to a degree, 8, because you do have recurring guests in that over the course of its episodes.
I mean, something we haven't sort of taken into account is the network could have gone, we've got all these other shows, we need, we've got the people on contract, we need guest stars, and maybe that's the thing, is maybe Doug didn't like the idea of it, so he pushed them all back to the second half of filming, so that's why they're all in 12 and not really in 11.
Right, okay, shall we talk about Cured? Okay, so Cured is the first episode of Red Dwarf 12 and the 68th episode. So we're almost at the 69th episode, which is next week. And the 69th episode it aired on the 12th of October 2017, same as the previous season, or the previous series, where they were available on UK TV Play. That's an app, Mark.
No.
Wait.
No.
It's almost 7 years from where we are now, because we're literally coming to October, so 7 years ago.
When did we start this podcast? Was it 2019?
2020.
2020. So it was only 3 years prior to us actually starting this podcast.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Incredible, isn't it? And this sees the group come across what we believe to be people from history who have been cured of evil. Yeah, let's Mark, what do you think in general terms about this episode?
Well, it had to be Hitler, didn't it? Red Dwarf has a history with Hitler. So it had to be Hitler that was getting cured of evil. And the moment he arrived, that was like, oh no, they've gone back to Hitler. And this program and this writer is clearly fucking obsessed with making Hitler funny. And it's bold. It's definitely a bold thing to do.
How did you feel until the reveal, or did you start to clock it, or was it something that you? Because one of the things that I think it's difficult to remember about is like, did it make people feel uneasy to begin with and gone, what are they doing here? And then obviously the reveal, or did you feel there was a twist coming with it?
I wondered if it was going to be some kind of wax world reference, and I got that wrong.
Yeah. How did you feel during before the reveal, though?
Weirdly, I think it was only Hitler that made me go, oh, even though Stalin killed a lot more people than Hitler did. And I think Vlad the Impaler did too. But I don't know, I don't want to say Hitler's special, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's got more PR. He's got better PR than Vlad the Impaler.
Again, that's not how I'd want to phrase it, Carl.
Yeah, it's interesting, the choice, and to be the first episode of the series as well, it's a strong choice, and the reveal's quite late on. I can imagine there being a bit of trepidation watching it the first time round, and then obviously on rewatches it helps because then you're kind of into the the knowledge of it, and you can like sort of loosen up a little bit, and you do feel it in the audience a little bit as well. I feel like the audience does a bit of trepidation when you listen to the soundtrack.
It didn't bother me whatsoever. I don't know why.
I think the droids thing makes sense because they didn't really give you a good explanation as to how and where they found them. They said that they'd created them from their ancestors, which means it's not the same person. So it wasn't Hitler, was it?
It was something to do with like the DNA strand that they could like feed it back through. And then there was the whole thing about Hitler not having a child and the conspiracy theory that he went off and did some, and it was a doppelganger that actually got killed and things.
It's very Assassin's Creed. If you've ever played that, the sort of, we're using your relative to trace back and then you can live in the life of your ancestor sort of. Sometimes it makes you wonder if Doug Naylor said that this is the case, that whatever media he's consuming at the time tends to influence what he's writing. So it makes me wonder if he watched Richard Naylor play Assassin's Creed and at the same time was, as he has done over the course of the series, probably watched a lot of History Channel, because Hitler's virtually a recurring character now in Red Dwarf.
Who'd have thought we'd be saying that? 12 series in. It is fascinating that they do choose that. I actually quite like the science of it. I mean, from someone who thinks things can be a little bit too far-fetched, I think obviously it's not scientifically sound, but it is scientifically sound in a sci-fi world that you could potentially trace back through a DNA strand and like sort of reconstitute somebody from that, by going backwards and working it out and constructing it and things like that. I think that is a sci-fi thing that could potentially, or does potentially work in the idea. I mean, obviously it's not that in this episode, but it's what it's portrayed to be. And I think that's quite an interesting sci-fi element, really.
I mean, it's very much one of those, they were thinking about that if they could do it, then rather than they should do it. In the same as ways, when cloning was first developed, it was like, we can do it. It's like, yeah, but should we be doing it? And this just feels like 3 million years into the future, the evolution of that, of like, we can bring back Vlad the Impaler and make him really cuddly. And it's like, well, that's great, but should we do that? But part of me wonders if the reason that the people behind it are was it United American, whatever they're called, the United American Federation, is a bit of a dig.
It is, isn't it? Because it actually does say, I mean, obviously, we'll talk about the book a bit at some point, but the fact that he's going like sort of, oh, well, they decided that, they were going to do a peace treaty, and anyone that didn't agree with peace treaty went to war with, which is very, very pointed.
It's not subtle, is it?
But I loved it. I did love it. I just like, anyone that doesn't sign this peace treaty is going to this war. So naturally, the people who didn't want to go to war went to war. It was like, okay, all right. It just absolutely nail on the human condition, basically. That's what he's effectively talking about, isn't it? But let's go back to the top, and we'll get into a bit more detail into the show as well. But we do start off, and this is what I say about, for me, there's a little bit of a thing where it feels like either one of two things. It feels like almost, what's the word? Like an episode of the show that Lee Mack does. It's quite slow pace. It's just in one room. They're sitting down, they're playing poker. And it's not really a quick thing. And it feels very situation comedy. That's what it feels like in that particular moment. And it does go on for a few minutes, this. I do think it's a good scene. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't feel too Red Dwarfy for me, but I do like the actual scene. I do like the playoff of between Kat and Lister in this. Yeah, so the poker scene it's definitely something, and it comes back at the end, doesn't it? Because it's effectively him saying "pokey face," So
yeah, you get the payoff from it. But you're right. I would have thought that previous series of Red Dwarf, this would have been much quicker. You think about how much goes on in something like Thanks for the Memory, and how it's a murder mystery in 24 minutes, basically. That isn't this. You're right about it. I wouldn't agree with the term plodding, but slower paced compared to previous series, perhaps.
For me, it's a good scene, and if it wasn't a good scene, I think it would have spoiled it. But in this, with teaching Kat poker face, for me, it was very much like, oh, something's going to happen at the end of the episode where Kat's going to need to do a poker face. It was very much a sort of line up the shot ready for the end of the episode. But obviously, the plot of this twists and turns to the point where it's like, well, it's the how is he going to use it rather than the, what is he, when is he going to use it? That made sense.
Yeah, it is. It does. And Kat gets obviously a bit of time here as well. The fact that he's learning to play poker. He doesn't give him the cards at the beginning, and then he gets his cards, and he can't give his pokey face away. It's all nicely done. It all is generally nicely done.
I think part of that scene that I particularly enjoyed was Robert Llewellyn's Crichton faces. Whilst he got no lines, he was just pulling faces, and they were just perfect.
Just as a check, Mark, would you have worn the jacket, the pink and purple cat print jacket with glittery bits?
Yes,
of course. That's good. Otherwise, I thought something would be wrong there.
You've passed the biometric data pass for Mark. It isn't an AI Mark Adams.
The thing, there was a bit where he invites Rimmer over to play, and he says, "Are you ready, Cincinnati?" And I was trying to remember if that was the character's name Rimmer had in Back to Gunman of the Apocalypse.
Dangerous Dan McGrew.
Dangerous Dan McGrew, yeah. So I was like, oh, what's that reference to? Like, are you ready, Cincinnati?
It's a good episode, though, Gunman of the Apocalypse. It's probably the second best episode of the series.
It's the best one.
It's probably the second best episode of the
series. Best one.
We've got to talk about starting a Starbug. What did you think to getting Starbug up and running? Again, to pay off later on, but it was an interesting little thing.
Well, it reminded me of my first car. I've only ever had one car that had a choke. And when I had a car that had a choke, I didn't really know how to use a choke.
You're not going to choke.
No. But
you're not going to choke. He's choking. Sorry.
But yeah, it reminded me of that because I always struggled with the extra bit that I didn't learn when I was doing my learner driving. And yeah, we've all had cars that are a little bit temperamental. And it was a fun gag.
Some of the younger people, if we've got any, listen to the podcast, say, what on earth is a choke?
Yeah. Or the Americans listening, because a lot of the American cars are automatic.
That's true.
True.
It reminded me of Biff in Back to the Future with the no one knows how to start this car but me. And that's just because of how Back to the Future I feel has permeated my life over the last 30 plus years. I really did enjoy the scene. I mean, it could have been hokey, but the fact that there was the whole thing of the light switching on and it actually looking impressive when it switched on, and the fairy dice, of course, got to have the fairy dice. It was really good fun, and just the line of "smooth as the day we got her," really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
There's this nice familiarity now, like everybody, I mean, they are, but everybody's settled in. So yeah, you can't start Starbug without elbowing it and thumping rhythmically on the side and pumping the thing. And it's just this everyday thing that they know how to deal with. But, you know, if an outsider came in, they're like, what the hell is this?
And that's obviously the playoff at the end, isn't it? When it's like, well, I would have got away, but I couldn't get Starbug started.
I think it's also a nice little kind of nod to how the cast are aging and how, like, they might have a bit of a gammy knee now or might not quite get up as easily in the morning as they used to. I think it's might even be a little bit of a dig or a reference there as well.
Yeah, it could be, definitely. Because it is dodgy as well, that they have to keep turning left. They have to keep turning left. I don't know, if Mark, if you caught the fact it only had one engine in the credits or not. I can't remember if that was...
No, I didn't.
Never touched upon. But,
no.
But yeah, the whole...
I didn't do well in the credits, let's be real.
When it kept like sort of leaning over to like show that they go around.
Yeah, that reminded me of Back to Reality with the sitting on boxes and just that kind of physical sort of all-together acting. And when by the time they cut back to him the third time, like Craig Charles is like, oh, you know, and just looking really like, oh, this, come on.
So when they get to the base, have you managed to have a look at what it says on the pods themselves when they said like sort of Adolf Hitler and there's a few little names of the pods?
No, I don't remember because I've got it playing at the moment. I've not got to there, but it's coming up in a moment. Let's have a look. Oh yes, so things like Vlad the Impaler, do not leave unattended sharps near the patient.
Oh, did they do stuff like that? I didn't clock that.
Yeah.
I only clocked it on this watch. I was like, oh, that says something there.
Joseph Stalin, unattended belongings will be forcibly redistributed by the patient. Doesn't say anything for Messalina. And then for Hitler, it's, art therapy treatment prescribed. Do not provide criticism of work.
That's good. That is very good. That's very meta. Because whenever anything descends into a Hitler conversation, that's the conversation ended, isn't it? So
well, he was an artist and a vegetarian, you know.
He was certainly a vegetarian.
What about Rupert Murdoch, though?
Incurable. That was savage. I loved that.
Not responding to treatments.
I thought that was great. That was so naughty.
The thing is, as well, with that, you could look at that and go, oh, that's a joke of the time. And then you think, he has been around for a very long time. The joke will probably still last for a good while. Like with Robert Maxwell, that joke lasted for a very long time, that he fell off his boat and disappeared.
But what I think's really interesting in this like part of the show is when they're talking about curing evil, that Rimmer's right. Evil isn't an affliction. It's a choice. And I think it's an interesting debate. They don't really go into it. And I think that's something that Red Dwarf has always done, is it's given you a sci-fi concept and used it for the lulls. But they've been quite sophisticated concepts that you could have explored much more widely.
They do. I mean, during the meal scene, I found that really fascinating, that actually, because it is interesting. I mean, you talk about, like, Star Trek is probably the most pertinent example of this, where Roddenberry wants to have a show that is a complete and utter utopia, that, you know, everyone gets on and none of the people who are on the Enterprise D have any real beef between each other. And then you get a show which is completely the antithesis to that, with Deep Space Nine, where people are fighting between themselves and there's conflict, and people are always saying there has to be conflict to create a show, because if you don't have conflict, then how can you create one? And in the meal scene, they do talk about that. They do talk about like sort of, well, the fact that once we find out there's a cure for evil, then this will happen and that will happen and this will happen and all of this will fall and things like that. And it's a really interesting like sort of point of view that, you know, you can't have that utopia because obviously it'll be, I mean, I'm looking from a different angle, but the way they're perceiving it is like, well, you know, everything would go to smeg basically. And I suppose it's like the whole like idea of capitalism and things like that, where it's, you know, they have all those elements. And how many times have we seen conspiracy films or TV shows or anything when they talk about, or even real life when they talk about war is money, you know, about the fact of building a military industry complex. So there is that kind of underlying thing. And I think that meal scene works really well at showcasing that, and especially with the United America side of things that they're trying to get across.
Is this the first time where they've actively satirized the States? I mean, we've obviously had stuff like dollar pounds and how society will have become bigger and more Americanized in the future. But is this the first dig at the States that they've had?
Politically, I think yes.
Yeah.
You've had like, you know, Ruby Wax's cameo back in the day where she was hosting like the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous sort of show. And they were talking about that this was from Dr. So-and-so with the condom that called you back. But I don't think they've ever really gone out of the way to point at America's policies and political stances. And so if there was ever a chance to do that, it would have been justice.
Yeah.
And
they didn't.
No. And whereas with this, it does feel like something, it feels very Space Force. You know what I mean? We're going to go to space and with an army for, you know, reasons. And this feels like we're going to cure evil because why not, you know, for dick swinging rights. And it's very like that. You know, either the Americans or the Russians, please beep out Russians so they don't come after me.
It's very like saying Americans, it's American hubris, isn't it?
Yeah.
Effectively, that's what they're trying to get across, that, you know, it's America's way or no other way, and that's it. You know, America's the leader of the free world, and you've got to follow us or be damned. And that's kind of what the whole United America thing is.
Yeah, it's strange, and it does make me wonder that if, you know, in any other series, mentioning these now would mean that they would come back in a later series as some kind of baddie. But it's only in this one that is mentioned. It's like M-Core. When we get to M-Core, they could be a recurring evil lurking in the background.
Technically, they are recurring.
Yeah.
M-Core technically is recurring because of it was mentioned in 11.
Yes.
I mean, I think it was Megacore or something like that in 11, and then obviously the M-Core gets mentioned in 12, and obviously focus on. So it's like the germ of the ideas in 11, and
Yeah.
it just goes back to it, which is interesting.
But like I said, this is the first time we ever hear of the United American Association or whatever they're called. And yeah, you know, they could be like the big overarching baddie in a series, but they're just here to point at them and go like, oh, you've got some very big ideas, haven't you? May not necessarily work.
During the meal, Hitler takes an Ellen selfie.
Oh, don't.
I
think that's pushing it. I do think that's pushing it with what was clearly, well, it's a Heil, isn't it? And it's pushing it. And this, I went, no, when he did it. And
we saw it.
You were there, yeah. I did it again when I was watching it on my own.
Someone from the production crew has probably got that framed at home.
Yeah.
And it does. I mean, this is a kind of like a loose referential thing, but you got to think about out of time, don't you? When it comes to this, it says with the Goerings, and it feels a little bit that they have become themselves in the future, where it's like we're having a meal with the Goerings and Adolf Hitler. It's like, yeah, now because of technology, you're getting an Ellen at the Oscars selfie with a little allusion to something else just before he takes it.
I never thought that I would write down the following 4 words ever. I wrote down, "Oh, Hitler's so sweet." Because, you know, the whole "call me Dolphy" and how he's like, "It's because I'm Hitler, isn't it?" It's just like,
I said to me Ralph before, I was like, I think he's a really good actor. I think it'll be very difficult to cast him. And the way he's got humility, like you say, where it's like, it's because I'm Hitler, isn't it? You know, I went to AMP school. It's like, yay! And he goes from like really high to really low to kind of like to humility, to shyness, to kind of walking away, and yeah, it's great. And what I loved about the watch as well, it took you a little bit of time, but then you did go, have you seen his armband?
Yeah, with the smiley face instead of the swastika. I clocked it. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, that's a nice touch.
I liked the no mind Führer. That was the old me. I'm not knocking therapy, but it is like therapy speech, like stereotype therapy speech.
That's interesting to say that, because you said, Mark, it was you that said it about, well, was it Carl? You said about the fact that whatever Doug Naylor's watching or stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's a therapy session next week as well.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And Snacky gave them therapy.
Yeah.
Maybe Doug's working. Maybe Doug and Rob are working through stuff.
I didn't want to say that, but if you say it now, so that's fine.
It's fine. I've already mentioned the Russians, so I may as well say Rob Grant.
And going back to the Lister scene, and it's played. Lister plays the "I'm not allowed to come out with you. My parents have said no" kind of style, and I do like that kind of comedy. You know, where you get episodes where, you know, it's like a boyfriend and girlfriend falling out, or someone's pregnant and the same push, and it's something different, and or you know, it's situations that are clearly meant to be something else, but it isn't. I do like that idea, and obviously him going, I'm not allowed to play with you, okay? It's like, yeah, it's like a kid being told, you're not playing with number 10 around the corner. He's a bad one. You've got to stay away from him. Yeah. And I do like that kind of aspect to it.
I do think that Hitler, both the script and the actor, absolutely steal the show in this episode. The other guys, it's not like they're bad or anything, but the lion's share of the great lines and the great acting really does go to Hitler. Oh my God. It's weird talking about Hitler.
I looked up the actor because I was like, I must know him from something else. And he's not done that much, but he has played Ed Gein. So,
and Hitler. Wow.
Yeah, so that's 2 of the big ones off the list. But he's so, in his performance, he's so like emotional and happy and light. I don't think he brought that with him. I'm guessing that was the direction of like play, you know, this person who's like very much got out of therapy. He just happens to be Hitler.
I went to art school, and then he starts doing the whole like sort of stamping with his hand. Yeah. It's like he's got all the mannerisms still. I think as again, like it goes in waves. And then I tell you what else is cured. Lister's guitar playing is cured in this episode.
Yes. I was going to say that. What happened to Lister being shit at guitar playing? He's even shit at guitars later on in this series.
The next episode.
Is it that the only time that he can be good at guitar is when he's jamming with Hitler?
Jamming with Hitler, which is going to be my concept album that's coming out in 2025.
Please don't.
Is the Happy Wanderer going to be on it?
Oh, yes.
About
I'm get Colin involved.
About
you can tell, even though Craig Charles is acting like, and I shouldn't really, but they are having a whale of a time doing that bit. And
yeah, they are.
Doing it in front of the audience as well. You could tell they're just really enjoying everything. It's such a good scene between those two. And he does I can't remember the actor's name, but the actor who is playing Hitler does kind of steal this episode with
I think so.
his performance. But you can get away with that in this show because we're 12 series in, so it doesn't matter if somebody comes in and like steals the show. It's like, yeah, great, make a name for yourself off this, even though it's playing Hitler. But
It's absolutely amazing that we can talk about Hitler, as if he's your best bud.
yeah,
I want to emphasize that obviously the real Hitler is an unsalvageable monster that none of us in any way, shape, or form have any respect for.
yeah.
But the Hitler in this episode is fucking adorable.
Oh, can you imagine putting it on like any sane social media and just quotes from our show? Like, Hitler is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, Hitler, I'd love to spend some time playing guitar with Hitler.
Hitler is so sweet.
It's so sweet.
Yeah, just a little. His facial expressions, even when he's not saying anything, like when you're going around the table,
Cup of
talking
char.
about-
Cup
Yeah.
of char.
well, he does the British accent, doesn't he? I mean, obviously he's a British actor, but when he just says the cup of char, it's like, this is a nice guy, and it does put that thing to you of in another life, on another dimension. Would Hitler have been like this? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what can you do? Shall we talk about some other things going on as well? Because there's not just Hitler. We've got Vlad the Impaler. We've got
Stalin. He doesn't really do a lot in this, to be
Stalin
fair.
doesn't do a lot, no.
And Messalina.
Messalina is the word I'm looking for. Messalina, who is not attracted to the cat whatsoever.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Which is a great turnaround. And it's like, the cat's like saying there'll be drool and they'll be slipping all over the place. And then he just walks into camera shot, which is, I always love those shots. Whenever cinema photography does it, where you walk into camera shot and you just see his face, I go, oh. It's like, oh, he's decimated. It's great. One of the best moments of the episode.
Yeah. I like the fact as well that each of the people, when the ones that we do get to spend a bit more time with of the cured, they do something that's against what they're known for. So she brings him a glass of milk and he's like, no, oh God, no. And the fact that they say like, oh, she's a rampant nymphomaniac. And let's be fair, the cat is as well, but without the sex.
Yeah.
He's in theory, nymphomaniac.
I've just also thought of something as well. Can you imagine them going out as a band that covers The Cure and call themselves The Cured, where Hitler is the lead singer and guitar player, Mussolini is like on drums, Stalin's on bass.
It's only a matter of time before one of the conventions has it.
Yeah, yeah. When they
Friday, I'm in
dimension
love.
jump on, who would have the audacity to go as Hitler at a dimension jump and play in a band?
No, any Red Dwarf fans, there is a line, don't go to Dimension Jump as Dolphy. That is not okay. That is not okay.
I bet there'll be quite a few turning up as Messalina.
Stalin, Hitler, and Vlad the Impaler are like top 10 most famous evil bastards of all time. Why did they go for someone that's a bit more obscure, I wonder?
I think it would have been for the cat thing. And also, I'm sure there are other people that could have done the poison thing, which comes back later on when they sort of pin it on what's happening to the crew is basically what any of them could have done, which is they all believe they've been drugged.
Valerie Messalina was the third wife of Roman Emperor Claudius. She was a paternal cousin of Emperor Nero, a second cousin Emperor Caligula, and the great-grandaunt of Emperor Augustus. A powerful and influential woman with a reputation of promiscuity. She allegedly conspired against her husband and was executed on the discovery of the plot. Her notorious reputation probably resulted from political bias, but works of art and literature have perpetuated it into modern times.
So it seems to me like you're right that they needed a female evil character to seduce the cat. And now you've said it, that makes sense. But she's obviously involved with much more famous historical characters, like the infamous nymphomaniac Caligula and the horrible people Claudius and Nero. So, yeah, her association is strong. And
for some reason, then I thought you were going to say historical bastards.
Although they are historical bastards, aren't they? All of them.
Historical Bastards will be the name of the band that releases Jamming with Hitler in 2025.
On Dimension Jump.
On Dimension Jump. We're all going to go, yeah. And I'm going to dress as Messalina.
Don't dress as Hitler. It's not okay. Good.
I'm going to get Matt to do it.
Matt, don't dress as Hitler.
Slick his hair to the side.
Matt, please don't dress as Hitler.
Colin,
nor you, Colin.
Colin, make a great Vlad the Impaler.
Something I've just seen on here, and we talk about this at the beginning, and I just went onto the keyword Wikipedia for Red Dwarf, tongue-tied, and it says Starbug 19. I didn't catch that. The fact that they've moved to Starbug 19 because that's the only shuttle that they've got left.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, they've come a long way since Starbug 1 and 2, haven't they?
Starbug 19 is probably made up of bits and pieces of the previous 18.
Moving on. Obviously got the Mussolini stuff, and then we get them all kind of drugged or turned off, light B goes off, and then they all end up in horrible situations. How do you feel that landed?
The fall. I've just been through every single fall. All of them were great. I enjoyed that immensely. I think all of them were brilliant. All of them were brilliant. And I think their tortures were all really macabre as well, like really nasty shit. It was perhaps a little darker than I expected. And then I realised I probably should have expected darkness with an episode that features Hitler, Stalin, and Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah, because
I think you need to look at your life, Mark. Just start to reassess how you feel about things. I thought it would have been quite a light episode. It's got Hitler, it's got Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah, but Dolphy was so lovely.
I'll tell you another perfect moment for him as well. Is like, and it's just because it's me. It would be my Zippo. Oh, yes, it is. It is my Zippo.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. No, that is mine. It's fucking great.
It couldn't be Ainsley Hitler.
Yes.
I thought that was a deliberate thing too.
Oh, I'm sure Ainsley chuckled at that watching If It Home that day. I like how the setup and the punishments, two of them have been drugged, which is Messalina. Crichton's been impaled on a mop, so that's Vlad.
Yeah.
I can't remember what Stalin's main method of torture was.
It's obviously being a Bond villain, apparently.
Well, yeah, because we're stuck on a spike, being drowned, being set on fire, laser to the Tadger. Which one of these things doesn't belong?
It is, isn't it? It's like, which one of these doesn't?
The scenes of Chris Barry in the box, when he sort of goes, how could this get any worse? And then it catches fire. That's practical. I'm sure it's done with forced perspective to make it, but it really looks.
It probably would have been done with a screen in front of it, wouldn't it? And then when he's thrown it, it's lit up and, just, yeah.
It might be when they did the locker and the fire shot out, whatever that's called. It could be that.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
But the cat, the initial shot where it's like up to his chest, the water, I was like, oh, that looks a bit ropey. And then when it cuts to him and he's underwater, it's like, that looks way better.
They did miss a trick there, though. He came out combing his hair
with a
and
towel
looked
around his
fine.
neck.
They could have made him significantly more bedraggled and undignified, I thought.
He's a cat. You wouldn't have stood for that.
It was all right in Back to Earth. In Back to Earth, it was a bit like that.
True.
I thought it was interesting because it turns into almost not like a whodunit, because it feels a bit obvious that they're being hit with the methods that, I get that obviously with the methods of torture, you couldn't really do any of Hitler's. That would be way too far.
Yeah, it's kind of like an Among Us, isn't it, kind of thing?
Yeah.
you've got to find the traitor as such. But the problem is that everyone's using the MO for it, so you're not quite sure who it is.
Yeah.
And they don't hold on too long with that either. They kind of like, the reveal's quite quick.
I mean, we haven't even really spoken about him so far. Is Adrian Lucas as Professor Telford, who is the big guest star for this? You know, people know him from, I mean, I know him from Peak Practice, but people know him from pretty much, he's turned up in a lot of stuff. He's in a very good, oddly enough, he's in an episode of Absolute Power, the Stephen Fry sitcom, where he turns out to be a undercover Nazi, which is a weird thing. I've just thought, who owns a lot of Hitler's artwork. He plays a lot of baddies. So when the second he wheels in the wheelchair and talking like a villain,
he's deliberately doing that kind of RP.
Yeah,
style.
Hello, sort of.
Yeah.
I'm a scientist, you know. I'm not evil. Well, I mean, you know, it's a bit Peter Sellers in Doctor Strangelove, but then you get all whisked away by Vlad and Dolphy and Messalina that you kind of almost forget he's there until they do the, again, like the Among Us thing, like everybody's going to get tested to see who's a psychopath.
Do you think he might have killed Hob?
Oh, it's a possibility. We still don't know who killed Hob.
We don't know what happened to Hob. Maybe we'll find something out at Christmas. It has been nearly 12 months since we heard anything from Hob.
Why are you sweating, Mark?
I'm not sweating.
Yeah, interesting.
Where was Pasha when Hob went missing?
Probably asleep or eating or both, knowing that cat.
Yeah.
I mean, do we even know that Hob's dead, though?
Wait, no, who's Hob? Move on.
Moving on, let's talk about psychopaths for a second. We saw the cat reveal coming off quite a mile off, to be fair.
Yeah.
It was quite an obvious thing, but it's still delivered in quite an interesting way. What do you think to it, Mark?
Well, earlier in the episode, there was some interesting conversation about how, you know, psychopaths are ultimately incapable of empathy, but they're not necessarily evil or killers. And that's very true. And Cat ends up being a killer. So that was interesting. Just cold-bloodedly murders this guy. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it, but wow, just brutal at the end. Absolutely brutal. I liked it. I thought it was clever.
Everybody's got a friend or something who says, "Oh, my cat is a evil piece of work." It's like, oh, yeah, that. You could have a psychopathic cat. I know my friend, he had a cat that was a complete nutter. And yeah, so the fact that the cat turns out to be a psychopath is, like you say, you could see it coming a mile away, but it made sense. Then the fact it starts printing again, it's Professor Telford who now has the big gun and is no longer in his chair.
I thought that was actually pretty nasty, that was. It added an extra aspect of evil to the character who'd pretended to be disabled to make himself look more vulnerable than he was. I thought that was really clever, actually, because that's pretty fucking evil, actually, isn't it?
It does lead to, I mean, we spoke about it at the very beginning, the reveal that the cured are droids. And I was a little bit sad that they were droids. It almost felt a bit of a sort of wipe away sort of thing. Although they did do brilliant robot acting walking out of the door.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. But yeah, I was a bit sad.
It'd be difficult to do very much else, though, is it really, unless you actually said it was the real life reincarnation of Hitler.
Yeah. I mean, you could have had it that they, you know, he hacked Crichton's brain, and it could be that he did something to they are the doctors, and he just imprinted these memories onto them, but they are real. It's not that it felt like a bit of a cop out that there were droids, but like you say, logistically, what else could you have done without expanding the episode by another 10 minutes?
I think what's interesting is that after they've had the big conversation about whether or not it's okay or not to leave the evils, they then leave the evils. They don't take them onto Red Dwarf. Probably shouldn't have left them alone. And I don't know, that more than anything that they didn't get them afterwards, I think, grated with me. But, they're starting to accrue people on board that are never mentioned again, like Snacky, like Vendabar. So perhaps they were trying to avoid that, maybe.
We will talk about the missed opportunity with Snacky and Vendabar in an episode later on this series.
Yeah, absolutely, we will.
Because, there is the thing in this series, as we go along, there is a whole thing of, where machines are looked down upon and treated like lesser than. It happens in the next episode, and it happens later on in this series. So maybe the thing of like, well, we're not taking the droids with us, even though, it's 4 more droids that you could program to just be someone other than Hitler. It's, you could give them they're given the personalities that they've got, but just not have them be Stalin, Vlad the Impaler, and Messalina. But no, they leave them behind. Like you said, he says like he's brain hacked entire populations. So that's what made me think they could have been humans and he'd just brainwash them.
On the tongue-tied wiki, it says that Doug was inspired to write the episode on reading how disproportionate amount of corporate CEOs, bankers and politicians had so little empathy. The fact that he's kind of like, he references in that scene, but it's like he is kind of thinking in that mindset of that, isn't it? It's like not, it's that seed of evil or that seed of perceived evil that certain people have to be a certain type to get by, like your bankers and your politicians and, things like that power's drawn to certain aspects, certain psychological aspects to people. Yeah. And I think that's interesting in itself, that's the part of the reason why the show is the way it is.
In this, Telford explains that the droids are copies of real people, because he says that Dolphy was John Asquith, who was a neuroscientist.
Yeah.
So in a way, he's killed them and then brought back these people, given them hope with the personalities of, you were evil and now you're no longer evil. And then he's killed them again. But it is Adrian Lucas.
He's really fucking evil, isn't he?
Yeah. But as I say, if you hire Adrian Lucas, he does, as I've said on a lot of episodes, does good bastard.
He did.
The final element of like the pokey face as well, and like the cat shot first version, the cat definitely shot
savage.
First, was savage. Yeah. It's almost like numbingly savage. It's like, oh my, he didn't just do that.
He doesn't even blink.
And it's so casual. It's just like, pew. It's great. It's great. It's fucking great. And cat go to cat. Every time something like this happens, I'm like, this character is based on a slightly more intelligent, capable of speech, domestic house cat. You've seen a cat when it gets a mouse. It doesn't fucking care. Just pew.
They kind of set it up that he can be like that with the babies. Was it 10? It is in 10, isn't it? Where he shoots all of the clones.
Yeah, the polymorphs.
The polymorphs. He shoots
kind of
all
works
of them.
In 11. In it, Carl, we did a series 11.
We did.
There was a series before this one, which is 11.
I need to check if I can remember stuff from outside the podcast during that period of time.
There is an actual Red Dwarf 11.
I need to check in with Colin and Matt, see if they remember 11. But yeah, he has shot people before. I think he's just getting good at it. He's always had a bazookoid when it's required, and stuff like that. But yeah, the way he does this is just like, I think Telford like takes his fingers off the gun for like a second before he shoots it. In the chin as well. So it's like, bloody hell.
You ain't getting up from that.
No.
That's a sucker punch.
Yeah, exactly. It's not as silly and macho as it's not like an honourable gunfight. It's
and obviously before that we get the whole come to my side.
Yeah.
Come to my side. I've got a present for me. Okay. all that stuff as well, which worked really well.
You do wonder, Kat says it's the poker face, but like, how much of that was him actually going, oh, yeah, and how much of it was, I know what I'm doing here.
Cats are fickle.
Yeah, I'd like to think it was he did know what he was doing the whole time, but...
I think it's unfair to suggest that cats don't have some kind of affection and loyalty for certain people that they've spent time with. My cat has always had a hierarchy of who she wants to sit on. And it tends to be me, gay men, straight men, women. And I don't know why.
Familiarity of people around the house, or...
But I don't know where she's got the gays and straights differentiation from.
Well, we're just going to have to accept that your cat's got good gaydar, Mark.
I think she's just gently doesn't like other women. She hates other cats as well.
Yeah, my mate's cat hates men. Like, I've walked in once, I was like, hello, and it went for me. Like, not even like, no, it tried to scratch my hand off. It was like, oh, great. Yeah, hates men. Sweet as anything. I walk near him. No.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that she spent so much time with a bloke that women are a bit alien to her.
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay, well, let's wrap this up now. The only bit of extra production stuff that I wanted to bring up was the Happy Wanderer originally was going to be Toto's Africa, but
That would have been great.
the rights were refused because Lister would be playing alongside Adolf Hitler.
And the Happy Wanderer is out of copyright. So they didn't have to ask permission for the Happy Wanderer.
If only Africa was recorded in 1880.
Bum, 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 bum.
I've seen that live. I've seen Toto play that live.
Oh.
Great band. I mean, they're all session players, but a great band.
Yeah. And even though it's, again, sort of podcast, I love to mention other podcasts. I listen to have you ever heard of yacht rock?
No.
Nope.
It's that sort of period of smooth music from sort of the late 70s to the mid 80s. Like,
Okay.
Like, see, there was a reason why I was talking in this voice before.
Yeah.
It all comes back around, baby.
Like your sort of Kenny Loggins and your Doobie Brothers and all that kind of stuff, and Steely Dan. But they do, like, the podcasts I listen to talk about sort of the history of it, and nearly any big song you can think of from that genre, at least 3 members of Toto were playing on it.
Most of Thriller's got, and the Jacksons is Toto.
Yeah. I think nearly all of Thriller is Toto, and they co-wrote some of it as well.
Yeah.
Good grief.
I think it's one of the Pace brothers that wrote Human Nature. There's a demo of him doing Human Nature before.
Yeah.
Michael took it.
There's like 4 Picaros in that band. Yeah, it's they are very, very, like, interwoven with all of it.
See, obviously Picaro had died by the time I went to see them, but it was Leland Sklar depped on that particular one.
Yeah. They also, was it John Williams, the composer's son, was their singer for a good long while as well.
Yeah, he was a good singer. And he got Bobby Cambaldi of Africa. So he was the voice in there, and then Lucas has got like the rough edgy stuff that he does, but Lucas is the one that does the dan on Beat It, and then obviously it's Van Halen doing the solo.
Yeah.
So it's a Toto, amazing band. But they allowed South Park to have it though, didn't they? With Member Berries. I remember. Ding 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 ding.
I think it's one of the, maybe they didn't just explain it that well, or I mean, it's hard to explain, but if they're like, I mean, South Park's considered like as American as apple pie at the recent years, and they can do what they like, and it's not really deemed as harmful anymore or controversial as much as they try. But yeah, I can see why they turned it down. There is something about this series that I want to raise, because I am probably going to bring it up in other episodes, is for some reason I found that the end of episodes this series are incredibly abrupt.
Not quite as abrupt as...
Red Dwarf 11.
No.
Yeah. Not quite as abrupt as Officer Rimmer, but I think you're right.
You won't have heard Officer Rimmer yet, Carl, on the podcast. It was a Red Dwarf one. And we kind of go, well, yeah, it does kind of end abruptly, doesn't it? And then we finish it.
Yeah.
We just got to play the theme tune without saying anything about socials or anything like that.
Yeah, it's really odd in that it feels like there should be a little more of a bookend on it, but there isn't. It's just like someone finishes a line, walks out of shot, credits, and it's really jarring.
It's a stylistic project. As I say, it probably did start around Officer Rimmer, but he's continued it on, which is really interesting. It's maybe because that's why he slows everything down at the beginning. He runs out of time, but it's like I want the poker scene to play a little bit longer, and then by the time you get to the last act, it's like boom, off you go. Mark, any final thoughts before we move on to Siliconia next week?
It's a fun start to the series, and as ever with Red Dwarf, they are sometimes more brave than I would recommend when it comes to stuff like Hitler. This is great fun, and it could have been done really badly. It was a risk, and it was really fun. Really, really fun.
It's like putting your biggest gun out there first is having this one. I think it could have been this one or Siliconia, because you've got what happens in Siliconia and the visuals in that as well.
Yeah. Well, ironically, part of that is the original plan was Siliconia to be first, and it would make more sense with the guitar aspect of it.
Right.
Because if you've got the Siliconia where he finds the guitar, and then in this episode he's playing the guitar, it makes more sense than him doing it this way around. It's not massive difference, is it? But, because he's quite bad at playing the guitar again next episode, which is a bit weird.
I get the feeling as well that they wouldn't have got away with this on the BBC. I think Dave were much more like, go for it, or they didn't look. But I think the BBC would have been, oh, God, no. It's sort of like, no, go away. Right, to make him somebody else.
Okay, chaps. Well, if that's the end of this, we are 1/6 of the way through the final 6-part series of Red Dwarf. Where can people find Mark Adams online?
At Mark Adams HC on Twitter and on Instagram. Twitter, I talk about many, many things, including podcasting and wrestling and cats and my other work. And my Instagram, I just talk about weddings and funerals and naming ceremonies. It's probably only very interesting if you want a ceremony from me, really.
I was going to say, you should clarify that you're a human celebrant rather than I just talk about weddings and funerals.
Yeah, I'm a humanist celebrant.
Yeah.
Carl?
You can pretty much find me at I am Mr. Carl, and that's the unabbreviated MISTER on pretty much everything. I've kind of not binned off Twitter, but I don't go on it very often. I'm more on Instagram and Threads. Now I think Threads is a much nicer community. It doesn't have the numbers, but I enjoy it more. So yeah, those are probably the best two places to find me.
Well, you won't find me on X at the moment because I'm not on there. The only time I'm on there is for my promotional things for Make It So and for the Magic Box, both of which podcasts that I'm currently on. There's 2 podcasts. I'm on this one. That's 3 podcasts. I'm only on 3 podcasts. I'm not on any more.
That you can remember now.
I might be on another one.
You're not doing the Xcast anymore?
I might be on the Xcast. I might have.
So you are there?
Hey, I'm being humble. I'm trying to be humble. Yeah, I'm not on. No, I don't think I'm on anymore. I think that's it. Mark. But no, you can find me on Linktree, linktr.ee/Armuldrake, RMULDRAKE. My big push at the moment is my Lost podcast, where we are showcasing every single episode of season 1 of Lost on its 20th birthday. That's my biggest one. So that's the Magic Box. And Mark's pulling a face. Until next time.
Selfie.
Shipwrecked and Comatose is a podcast brought to you by the Film Stories Podcast Network.
The show was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North.
The logo was designed by Carl Bryan, and the theme tune was composed and performed by me, Colin Jackson Brown.
I suppose I'm here as well, Matt Latham.
Follow us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod and follow the network on Twitter at Film Stories.
My